Hello. So in this last micro lecture, we're going to learn some terms, some more specific terms, statements and arguments. So let's contrast some statements and non-statements, and then we'll say what statements are. So some statements might be the earth is a sphere, the earth is flat, some birds fly, or justice is valuable. Some non-statements, do you want Coke or Sprite? Open the door. Hello. Boo. So what's a statement? It's a piece of language or a mental occurrence of some sort that can be true or can be false. It says how things are, how things should be, so it could be a statement, a claim, a belief, a proposition. So those ones in the statement list can all be true or false. The earth is a sphere, true. The earth is false, flat. Some birds fly, true. Justice is valuable, true. Non-statements, do you want Coke or Sprite? It's not true or false. Open the door. Open the door. It's not true or false. Hello, not true or false. Boo, not true or false. So that's what makes the difference. We can have varying degrees in the confidence of their truth. I'm quite confident that the earth is a sphere. I'm highly skeptical that the earth is flat. So it's one thing to say a statement is true or false and then it's another thing to actually say, and it's true, or no, it's false. Okay, so statements, that's what those are. Basically like beliefs. Okay, so what about arguments? What are they? Well, again, we'll contrast arguments with non-arguments. So here's some arguments. Some whales over 80 feet. Anything over 80 feet is longer than any human. So some whale is longer than any human. This is a fair coin. Therefore, probably it won't land heads twice in a row. Or, Fido is brown and furry. Fido barks. So, Fido is probably a whale. Those are all arguments. Here's some non-arguments. First, Bob ate dinner. Then, Bob went to bed. Or, the moon orbits the earth because of gravity. Or, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, and so on. Okay, so none of those are arguments. So what's the difference between the arguments and the non-arguments? Well, an argument is a group of claims in which some of them, the premises, are intended to support another one, the conclusion. So there are some claims, one of them is the conclusion, the other are the premises, and the premises are intended to support the conclusion. And in particular, the goal is that they provide a reason to believe that the conclusion is true. And how do they do that? Well, they make it likely that the conclusion is true, if they succeed. So if we look back at these examples, the things listed as arguments all do that. There's a conclusion marked by either so or therefore, and then their premises, and they're intended to support the conclusion. The last argument is a bad argument, whereas the first two are good arguments, at least in the sense that if the premises are true, so is the conclusion. But they're all arguments, whereas in none of the non-arguments do we have that premises conclusion. In the narrative about Bob, we just have, well, this happened and then that happened. But the fact that the first thing happened is not evidence that the second thing happened. We say the moon orbits the earth because of gravity. So here we have an explanation, or at least a partial explanation of why the moon orbits the earth, but it's not an argument that the moon orbits the earth. It's not an assertion that the moon does orbit the earth. It's saying, okay, here's a fact. The moon orbits the earth. Here's why. But we already are believing the moon orbits the earth, and then we get an explanation for why that belief is true, given that it is. And then the Declaration of Independence reading, they're just a bunch of assertions. They fit together to form a coherent worldview, whether or not it's true, but they're just laying out the worldview, as is the moon orbits the earth because of gravity. Okay? So arguments, premise, conclusion. The premises are the reasons or the evidence to believe that the conclusion is true. There are lots of other things we do in language and thinking besides presenting arguments. We're going to be focused a lot on arguments in the course. And so one thing we want to see is, okay, what makes an argument good? And we can very broadly say that there are two aspects of being a good argument. First, the argument should have a good foundation. Its premises should be true. And then second, the premises should support the conclusion, meaning that the conclusion is true if the premises are. And so a good argument, if you lack either, you're not a good argument, and if you have both, you are a good argument. So what is it to be a good argument? Just have the good foundation and good support. So it's one thing for the argument to be there, and you can evaluate it. And one thing you might say is, oh, I believe the premises, and the premises support the conclusion, and therefore I will believe the conclusion on the strength of the premises support for the conclusion. And that would be to infer the conclusion from the premises. It's actually to use the argument in its most natural sense in reasoning. But you might think, well, it's a bad argument, either because the foundation is bad or because the support is bad. You might even think, well, the conclusion is false, and that actually means that maybe I have reason to reject one of the premises. Okay, so inferring is the specific act of actually basically endorsing the argument and saying, yes, that argument provides good reason to believe the conclusion, and on that basis, I do believe the conclusion. That's drawing the inference. That's endorsing the argument. Okay, so to sum this up, we've got the idea of a statement. It can be true. It's anything that can be true or false. We've got an argument. It's a group of statements in which some of them, the premises, are intended to support the conclusion. And there are two aspects to being a good argument: having a good foundation, which is having true premises, and having good support, the conclusions being true if the premises are. So in our class session this week, we will spend some time talking in more depth about the notion of an argument and doing some argument evaluation, and yeah, that's what we'll be up to. And then as we proceed, once we've done that, we'll then be moving on to identifying arguments, how to do that, and how to distinguish in more depth between arguments and non-arguments.